So we went and grabbed it and put it in the garage. And so we kind of covered it all up. And then we come back out and it was still good for another 2 or 3 weeks. So I still have, I look at this one farm, I have like, all these petunias are still like flowing down. I'm really happy. I feel good about that. It's September and I'm like, I like that. It's really cool. Yes, so they're, even though it's early morning, it's very easy. No, like it's just that there's people sleeping in the back. Like even when we were in school, we did 7 So he's sleeping.
You take your plasma? Yeah.
Anyway, so that was just so exciting. You know, like, they're talking about the red coffee. You can take the glass of the diet.
Yeah, they still want that.
There's been quite a few.
Every time you get blood there, it's AB. You got
I got the test. It's just regular.
My mom's always saying that she changed for us. That was like, well, you can't come again, even though we want to. And then when you're done, actually, it's safe. Depleted.
many seconds are left?
60.
We need to figure out how to get the countdown on that.
In my wrestling, in my doubts, in my failures, and won't walk out. Your grace love will lead me through. You are peace in my trouble sea. Oh, you are peace in my trouble sea. In the silence, you won't let go. In the questions, your truth will hold.
if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. And the blood of Jesus, his Son, purifies us from all sin.
Stop working, you never stop working, even when I don't see it, you're working, even when I don't feel it, you're working, you never stop working, you never stop working, even when I don't see it, you're working, even when I don't feel it, you're working, you never stop working. Stop working, even when I don't see it, you're working, even when I don't feel it, you're working, you never stop working, you never stop working, we make a miracle working, promise keeping, light in the darkness, my God, that is who you are. We make a is who you are. That is who you are.
Well, I just want to in this letter in the New Testament. Just a reminder that this is John's letter, one of John's letters that he wrote to the churches that he ministered to, most likely in the Middle East, and it was circulated amongst the churches that were there. But even though it was written 2,000-ish years ago to a church on the other side of the world, it still has great meaning for us here today. And that's what we want to look at as we begin to or continue to uncover or discover anew what John wrote to these churches accidentally. Maybe you did it on purpose, and you immediately realized how wrong it was, how much of a mistake you had made. I have an example. Some of you may have heard this. I know I shared it quite a few years ago, but it's just, it was a mistake that I made. I had finished high school. I was working I was driving out to Delisle to join them for church. And I was running a little late, shall we say. And maybe I was young and driving a little faster than maybe I should have on the way out to not be late for church. And I come around the corner to where, if you've never been to Delisle, their parking is all on the street in front of the church. And they park on both sides of the street, kind of straight-in parking for a Sunday service. And as I came around the corner, I saw a parking spot right beside my mom's car. And I came around the corner and pulled into that parking spot. Now, it may have been that I was going too fast, but I kind of slid all the way up the side of my mom's car as I came to park. Remember, I'm going to church. I'm already late. It's probably my fault, not the gravel's fault. If I'm being honest, it was my fault. And here I was, all the way up the side of my mom's car with my car. My car was fine; it didn't matter. Accidentally or not, you can imagine me walking into the church, my head hanging low, ashamed of what I had done, knowing that this was going to be a problem, right? I had made a mistake. The fear and the worry, the shame that I felt, because I thought I was a pretty good driver, but I was still pretty young. It felt like one of the terms that we can use is, it's kind of like a storm that we entered into, right? That I entered into as I walked, as this happened, and I began to consider the consequences of what could happen. Like a storm in a teacup, they would say, that the outside world doesn't really notice, but it meant the world to me at the time. I felt really bad. In the grand scheme, it didn't really matter a whole lot, but it could have really hurt a relationship that I had with my parents as well. That's kind of like what happens when we make a mistake, when we sin before God. We can have those same feelings, right? Where we feel ashamed, we feel worried, we feel fear, and we're not sure what to do about it or what the consequences of our actions will be. In 1 John chapter 1, he began by testifying to us that Jesus is the life that God has given us. Today we're going to start reading in verse 5. It'll show up on the screen for you, and you can follow along with me, either on the screen or in your own text as well. But I want to remind you, as we begin to read here, John is going to talk about God being the light. And the light was a key theme for John in his gospel. In the Gospel of John, he mentioned God as light, or light over 40 times within that one gospel. In this letter, he mentions it many times as well. But even from before, outside of John's work in the scriptures, from the burning bush being a representation of God, to him leading the Israelites by a pillar of fire, to the lamp on the stand, over and over again, God is referenced as being light. And here we see it again in verse 5 of chapter 1 of 1 John. Verse 5 says this: "This is the message we have heard from him and declare to you. God is light. In him there is no darkness at all." God is light. So John declares it. He says God is light. Light really, it chases out darkness, doesn't it? Where there is a light, there can't be darkness. Now, when stuff blocks that light, there are shadows that come into play. There are things that happen in our world. But really, light chases out that darkness. It pushes it away. It reveals what's hiding in the corners, whether it's the corners of our lives or the corners of our house or the corners of the streets that we drive down. In one of my jobs I had during one summer while I was in college, I worked in a potash mine underground. And when you head a kilometer underground, there is no outside light. You only have the light that you carry with you. And this image, whenever I think of this image of God being light and it's shining in the darkness, that's what I picture as being underground in the potash mine. I know some of you have been there, some of you work there as well. But when you turn off all of those lights, when you're left in complete and utter darkness, it is completely dark. You can't see anything. You can put your finger on your eyeball, you don't see anything at all. There's no hint of light. But the smallest light makes such a huge difference in that darkness. Whether it's the light from a watch or the small lamp that you carry with you, that light can make a huge difference, illuminating everything around you. And it's absolutely amazing to see the difference that light makes. And God is light, John declares. In him, there is no darkness at all. Now he takes it a little further. He says, if we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. If we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in the darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. Fellowship really is that community that we have with him, the relationship that we can have with God. If we say that we have a relationship with him yet live in the dark, John is calling us liars, that we haven't quite got it yet, that the way we live is not matching with the way that God has called us to live. See, darkness and light cannot coexist in the same place together. They cannot live together. And John is telling us here that the truth is light can't be darkness can't be in the presence of light. Light overpowers it. And when we're in the light, the fellowship that we have with God go hand in hand. When we begin to walk in that light, to dwell in God's presence, the darkness is cast from our presence, and we become, or we achieve, or not achieve, we come into the presence of God, into the presence of his pure light. John helps us, he explains it a little more in verse 7. He says, but if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his son, purifies us from all sin. So if we walk in the light, if we dwell in God's presence as Jesus is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. So not only do we have fellowship with God, with our Creator, but we have fellowship with others who are walking in that light as well, with the community, with the church that we have here. When we step into God's presence, when we move past that barrier into his presence, we also are in the presence or in the fellowship of the community, the believers, the brothers and sisters that also believe in him. And that's all possible